Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bleed Blue podcast. This is the podcast where I talk about everything Evil Geniuses related. Um, uh, you know, unfortunately, I wasn't able to create, unfortunately, another screen for when I, show like links and show like different images on the screen. So I'm sorry. We're gonna have to do the same thing where we did last time, where we kind of have to just put it up over the screen and it'll block out my face, but whatever. Also, yes, I do know about the fact that the stupid under blue on the background has the red line. These are all things I'm gonna fix. Okay, these are all things I'm gonna fix. Um, but it's gonna be a little bit difficult because this week I'm actually upgrading my PC, so I'm gonna be dealing with that. Obviously it's Thanksgiving. I'm gonna be busy on Friday as well, so yeah, I don't know that another episode will be out next weekend, or next week, but hopefully that following week, we can have an episode out where I actually have everything fixed. Like I'll have like the better background, I'll have more backgrounds that I can use, hopefully of higher quality as well, and the show should be a little bit better. I'll also be able to do more things with my PC. So um, yeah, just kind of wanted to give that introduction. As you can probably see from the title of this video, this is going to be a MOBA special edition episode, which is not something that I think is going to happen very often at all, if ever again, because we don't really have any big news in terms of Valorant or Counter-Strike. It's been pretty quiet. I mean, Hext and Neelan have been at they've been at the Monster Energy booth in Atlanta. So they're doing that, which is cool. And then in Valorant, I think we lost XP3 as our coach for Game Changers. But other than that, that's kind of really been the only news. I was going to talk about my thoughts on how the Valorant system is going to work in terms of having a 10-man roster, but because of the news that's come out in the MOBA esport games that EG is participating in currently, I just felt like it was best to push that off, because there's plenty of time before Valorant will start. And some of the topics related to the Dota 2 and League of Legends are actually extremely, extremely important. And it says something that I'm about to start this podcast and mention that the League of Legends section isn't really even the biggest or most important in my eyes section of this episode, which is pretty crazy. Um, so yeah, I mean, I guess without further ado, let's kind of let's get started here. So let's get started with the League of Legends roster. So the League of Legends roster has been finalized, guys. The League of Legends roster has been finalized, and I'm going to kind of break all of this down. So, for those of you who have been out of the loop in terms of what has been going on with the LCS team, after Worlds, it was a lot of question marks were going around in terms of what EG's roster was going to be. Actually, as to what all the rosters in NA were going to be, because there's going to be because there's obviously massive budget cuts that are happening in the North American scene currently, and therefore it was expected that a lot of younger talent, players in the academy leagues were probably going to get a step up. We're probably going to be moved to top to their to some type of roster, whether that is the same roster that their organization owns, or if it's going to be a different organization. But they're probably going to get a move up, and I think you've seen that in the LCS this off season so far. But so there were some question marks with EG's roster. Inspired has signed a decently, I think it's like a 4-year deal or something, so he's still on the team. That wasn't going to change. Jojo Pyun, obviously that wasn't going to change. Vulcan, that wasn't going to change either. Really, the question marks were: is Impact going to stay, or what is going to happen with Impact? I think everyone kind of had an idea that Impact probably wasn't going to be staying with Evil Geniuses after this season, but it was still a question mark as to what was going to happen with him. And then some of the other question marks, or the other question mark, would be our ADC, because for those who don't know, or I'm sorry, Cowrie, basically decided, he doesn't want to be with EG. He signed with Carmine Corp or K Corp, um, and is going to be over playing for them. And so I assume that's happening because probably just better. It's closer to home for those of you who don't remember. Cowrie is Turkish, and so maybe he had family over there, or maybe he just didn't see the LCS as a place that he wanted to be in, and he thought he was better than that. Who knows? But basically that left quite a big question mark because that was something that we just figured we took for granted to some degree in terms of, well, if Danny isn't playing, we have Cowrie, so we'll put him into our roster, right? Well, turns out that's not really going to be the case. And then on top of all of those things, a lot of coaches and or mostly coaches pretty much, have left EG. Peter Dunn's left EG, Rigby's left EG. There's quite a few other people behind the scenes who have also left EG. And so I was pretty concerned. I wasn't really looking forward to this offseason because I was worried that with Peter Dunn being gone, with some of the Rigby being gone, with these other people that definitely had a big influence into how Evil Geniuses not only played, but in terms of their foundation and their structure, and coming from their academy rosters that they run, and developing talent and finding new talent and all these things, I was worried that maybe it was going to go downhill. But they hired. Let's see here. I believe. I'm sorry. Just give me one moment. Just gotta find. Kelsey Moser. Kelsey Moser got hired as one of the coaches, which I think is a very strong pickup for obvious reasons. So that's good. But and they've done a little bit. They've hired some good people in terms of I think Kelsey is probably the standout of every of the hires, at least for the coaching staff, right? I think that's a really solid pickup. And she did mention she posted a tweet where she basically mentions that she really wants to work on developing talent, and she's gonna obviously a big thing for her is going to be she wants the academy system to be strong for Evil Geniuses. So I'm looking forward to kind of how that develops, right? Um, I will say, and this is something that I'll talk about a little bit more in terms of talking about the roster that we currently are going to be fielding for 2023. But Surdy, who is he's been with the Academy roster for 2 years, I think, maybe at least one. But he's a top laner. He was an Academy top laner for Evil Geniuses. He is no longer going to be with Evil Geniuses. I'm not sure where he's going to go. He kind of got I don't know if he left or if he got removed by Evil Geniuses. I would I would suspect the latter just because it's so late into the offseason. It's going to be really difficult for Surdy to find a good place or a place that already doesn't have spots taken, right? Um, and I think that's a damn shame because I actually really liked Surdy. I think he's a really talented player. He's a really good player, and I actually expected him to get the move up into the EG roster. So I guess without further ado, for some of you who aren't aware of EG's current roster for 2023, it is in the top lane. It's going to be Someday from 100 Thieves, and then in the jungle we have Inspired, mid lane Jojo Pyun, AD carry FBI, which I'll talk about in a second, support Vulcan, and obviously our coach Kelsey Moser. So kind of jumping back to Surdy, I just didn't expect. I don't know. I kind of expected Surdy to get the move up, and instead of signing Someday, um, I just it's not something that I expected. Now, granted, there's context to this, right? So originally, Evil Geniuses was actually trying to get Tenacity, who's an Academy player for 100 Thieves, and actually did get the move up to 100 Thieves main roster. And in fact, Tenacity, at least from what the rumors it's that Tenacity and Evil Geniuses had actually verbally agreed. Like they both wanted to work together, and Tenacity was going to be on Evil Geniuses. But the problem was 100 Thieves had the power in terms of whether or not they wanted to let Tenacity join Evil Geniuses. And it didn't happen. 100 Thieves didn't want it to happen. They gave Tenacity the move up to their roster, and instead said and then let Someday have his options, and Someday ended up replacing Impact, because Impact, by the way, he has he's obviously not on the team anymore. He I hope wherever he goes, he's successful. He's a really talent. Obviously, he's a super veteran. He's just the definition of consistency. Impact is an incredible person, an incredible player. I really hope he's able to join. I don't know if he's going back to Korea. I don't know what he's doing, but whatever he's doing, I hope he ends up being on a strong team where he ends up having a better chance to fight for something at Worlds, because I think he's a talented enough player to definitely do so. Um, and he deserves it, frankly. So best of luck to Impact. We're gonna miss him a lot, obviously. EG had like a little video kind of honoring Impact and everything, which I thought was a nice touch. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I just expected Surdy to get the move up. So I don't know. Listen, like, it's one of those where I think the team is better as of right now with Someday on the roster, but frankly, I just think when you look at this roster currently, and let me briefly talk about FBI. I actually think this is a really good pickup, especially once you consider that Cowrie is not going to be for EG anymore. They didn't really have any options, and I think FBI is probably one of the best options you can get. He's one of the best AD carries in the LCS. He's an insanely talented player, a really, really good laner, which is not something that EG has really had in a while. Danny was not really a good laner. Quite frankly. He was more of a late game. He liked to play in the team fights, and he wasn't a particularly good laner. And then with Cowrie, although he was a good laner, the problem with Cowrie was he was just a super aggressive player, and so he could basically, in a, I don't know how to draw this comparison without I don't want to get any flack in terms of being like, you think Jackie Love is the same level as Cowrie? No, but Jackie Love is an AD carry in the LPL, and he's someone who is a very talented player, but he's very aggressive, and he will either win you a game or lose you a game. And Cowrie was somewhat similar in that respect. At least in terms of how aggressive he was. And also Cowrie, you could tell, struggled in team fights a lot more compared to where Danny, excelled at it. So, overall, I think FBI is a great pickup. I think that's honestly probably the best pickup you could have gotten in the situation that you were put in. So I actually really like the FBI pickup. The only thing that I can say negatively about the team is just I think Surdy should have gotten the spot over Someday if you actually cared about developing talent, because let's think about the philosophy that was being used when EG this year with their roster, right? They had Jojo Pyun and Danny, who were the two young players on the squad, and then you had Impact, Inspired, and Vulcan, right? Now Inspired is super young, but he also is he was the LEC MVP, yada yada yada. He's been to Worlds, like he was young, but he's experienced, right? So it's not really like you have to develop him that much compared to putting more effort into JoJo and Danny. And so JoJo and Danny were the two young guns, and Danny already had some experience playing in the LCS, right? Already had some of the biggest moments in the LCS from the previous year, and so he was really coming into his own, and Evil Geniuses was playing around him, right? But Jojo Pyun was kind of being, because he was brand new and because he's so inexperienced, even just with League of Legends in general, they were making sure that not there was no massive load being put on Jojo, and that he could make mistakes and learn, and it wasn't going to drastically impact how well Evil Geniuses played. Obviously, I think Jojo Pyun at this point is now kind of in a similar stage to where Danny is, where he's had the experience, he's gotten significantly better since the beginning of 2022. So I expect him to grow quite considerably, and I think he's going to be one of the strongest mid laners in the LCS coming into 2023. I think he already proved it at Worlds. I think Jojo Pyun is an incredibly talented player. And I think he's in that same position that Danny was in, where he's had the time now, and it's his time to really like have impact on the squad, and more resources can be funneled to him. So I think that's kind of where I stand with Jojo Pyun. The problem is there's no young gun now to develop in the same way, right? Which I think was something that was super cool about EG. And now that's not really a thing. I mean, the only person they're developing at this point is Jojo Pyun. Someday doesn't need any of that. Inspired is fine. He doesn't read that much. There's not much else to. I don't want to say there's not much else to teach him. That sounds terrible, but I just mean in terms of like really developing a player to get used to the game and all that. It's not the same. And plus, when it comes to NA talent in terms of their academy roster, like you know there was the only two people that you could really realistically move up were pretty much Surdy and Tomio, and obviously Tomio wasn't going to get the move up because Inspired's on the team, right? And so I have concerns that we're probably going to end up losing Tomio at some point. That's probably going to happen because even though Tomio is sick, you're not going to replace Inspired with Tomio unless Inspired decides he wants to leave, and you have to consider at some point Tomio is going to be like, look, I like EG, or maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But if he does like, assuming he likes EG, even if he does like it, the organization, at some point he's probably just going to be like, look, I want to get my shot. I want to be able to play in the LCS. I think I'm good enough, and he probably is. Or he definitely is. So maybe he decides to go into the LCS, joining a different organization, right? So I think that's something that is kind of unfortunate. That is most likely at some point probably going to happen. We'll probably lose Tomio if we haven't already, and I could just be out of the loop, and maybe we've already lost him. Who knows? Well, you might. But going back to Someday, it's not that I don't. It's not that I have anything against Someday. It's just more so that I think the philosophy of EG has been developing talent, and it's a big thing for them, or at least they say it is. And they've tried to present themselves that way with every esports game they've been in. And so to me, it just kind of shocked me that they went with Someday over Surdy. Um, Not because Someday is worse than Surdy, but because Surdy is a young player with a lot of potential. And yeah, I mean you would have that same philosophy from the previous year where you have one player who's brand new, who has a lot of potential. You have Jojo Pyun, who at that point is playing kind of the role that Danny was playing, with being a super young player, but has a lot of potential, right? Or is has a lot of potential, but is also he's been in the league now a bit. He's played against international competition, right? Like it's not like he's completely inexperienced anymore, right? And then you have FBI, a super good laner you can rely on. Vulcan, a super good support player you can rely on, right? You have three roles that you can rely on, and kind of four, to be honest, if you want to include Jojo Pyun. And so it would have made sense to me to take the gamble on a young player, with potential that has been doing really good things, right? And so it makes me a little bit sad as well to see Surdy leave, just because I saw this from Peter Dunn, and I respect Peter Dunn a lot. And he had these. This is what he had to say about Surdy after Surdy kind of showed or basically posted about the fact that he was now going to be released from Evil Geniuses. So let me. I'm sorry, I just need to move this real quick. Perfect. So he says, so it's this tweet right here, guys. He says, genuinely believe it's a tragedy if Jet, who is Surdy, doesn't get a team because of how late this is into the off season. Yeah, I also think that was poorly managed by EG. They definitely, if this was something that was kind of known, I frankly, that's really bad management, and incredibly disrespectful to the player that you are releasing. Um, Incredibly smart and articulate about the game, has mechanics, constant grinder, and always at the top of champions queue and solo queue. Not much more you can ask for. And so that hurt me a little bit, significantly more once he had these things to say about him, because obviously it's really sad to hear about a player leaving your organization that had potential, had serious potential, has and works really hard at the game. That's something that not many NA players have. So yeah, I don't know. It seems a little bit strange to me. But there's obviously things I don't know. Maybe they didn't like, maybe it had to do with his champion pool. I don't see how that's a valid excuse. Um, but maybe he didn't show as much growth as they wanted, or something like that. I don't know. And who knows? Maybe Surdy, behind the scenes also didn't really want to stay with EG anymore and wanted to go elsewhere. Who knows? Again, I find that hard to believe considering how late it is into the off season. I don't really see how a player would want to do that this late into the offseason. But maybe it's something where Surdy didn't know, you know, if his spot was going to be, if he was going to move up to EG, and then once he realized, oh, it's not actually going to happen anymore, decided to leave. Because again, like I said, tenacity was probably going to take that spot if it wasn't someday. So who knows, right? There's a lot of things that are going on there that you know leave a lot to speculate on, right? So um, so yeah, as you can see here, guys, this is the roster. Someday, Inspire, Jojo Pyun, FBI, Vulcan with Kelsey Moser as the coach. Or so so yeah, I'm trying to see here real quick if there's anything showing. Well, I mean, so Impact is potentially going to FlyQuest. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, let's move on from this. We're going to actually move on. Rigby actually had some comments. For guys who don't know, Rigby obviously was the coach for EG this year, and he had some comments about multiple different things. It was about EU, NA, and then he touched on specifically Danny and Jojo Pyun. And so I thought this would be really interesting to go and look at. He's very critical and he's very honest and open in this discussion, which I think is exactly what you want to hear. These are the things you want to hear, right? Because you want to know what was actually going on within the team. I'm not really going to get into the NA coaches thing. I'm really just going to focus on the EG related topics, which obviously this in a way refers to that, but I'm not going to get into all that, right? Um, so he does mention some things. By the way, this was translated, and so you can kind of read. This is posted by Y Conotrop 12, and he kind of talks about a few of the different things, and in terms of like I was unable to watch the stream in person, so this is from his clips. Content blew up on Korean forums. Thought Reddit would be interested, so I made a translation. So it's a translation. It's not 100%, so don't take this with 100% accuracy. But it's the best we have, I guess. So in terms of scrims, you know, uh, mentions kind of that they played a lot of games against DRX, who ended up winning Worlds, and that they gained a lot from it. You got to remember as well, DRX was in play-ins as well. So EG and DRX are both in play-ins, so that potentially meant, and they were on different groups as well. So that could have something to do with the fact that they scrimmed as many times as they did. We once won a game in scrims against Chenji. Jojo Pyun was jumping up and down in his chair because he was so excited. You guys also got to remember, for Jojo Pyun, that's significant for him because he obviously admires Chovy so much, and Chovy is obviously on Genji, so I can see why Jojo was very excited for beating Genji, even if it is just a scrim. It was a dogfight with 10 skirmishes, and both ADCs had like 10 kills in 5 minutes. Now you can take from this that maybe it wasn't the best scrim in the world, the most official, like very like you know, both teams doing, or maybe Genji was trolling a little bit. Who knows, right? Who knows? But still, kind of thought it was funny that he mentioned that they beat Genji and that Jojo Pyun was really excited. At Worlds, this is something he specifies, which I really appreciate, that he mentions this. EG might be a Western team, but I assure you we were practicing just as hard as the Eastern teams. And so that was a nice thing to hear. It was something that I figured was probably true, just because EG, just the way they were playing at Worlds, you could tell they were the best NA team at Worlds, in terms of the ways they would adapt in their draft and the ways they played, and how you could tell they were just constantly working and adapting, trying to get better within the short time frame that they had. So we're going to move on here into this EG Danny and Jojo Pyun section. So during this section, he talks briefly about Danny, about how these are some of the things that he was struggling with while he was at MSI and post MSI. And then he, well, actually, honestly, I say briefly, but most of it is Danny related. And then Jojo is briefly mentioned at the bottom, and then later on he also talks about Jojo Pyun as well. So we will go to both of those. And now I will want to preface this to say, from what it sounds like, especially by the end of this second paragraph here, it doesn't sound like Danny and Rigby are on the best of terms, which Rigby acknowledges why that might be the case, and and he tries, at least in this translation, it sounds like he doesn't really have anything against him, that he understands maybe why things aren't their relationship isn't really the best, right? So let's get started at the top here where they talk about MSI. After MSI, both JoJo and Danny had a hard time focusing on the game. With Danny, I think the pressure got to him. Danny likes having room to breathe and enjoys doing things by himself. At MSI, Danny got stressed out for a number of reasons, one of them being that he couldn't adjust to the high ping due to his DPI. Apparently, this is actually a somewhat of an issue if your DPI is much higher. Um, for reference. Frankly, look, was this probably the biggest reason why Danny was struggling at MSI? No, it can't be. Surely it's not just because of his DPI. I would reckon it's probably more to do with the second thing he mentions here, which is, to be honest, I probably contributed to this stress by pushing him too hard. There were certain starts and champs he didn't want to play, but I convinced him to do it anyway. Something about him changed after MSI. I don't know exactly what he was going through, as he would always privately speak to Peter Dunn about personal matters. What I do know is that after we lost to C9 in LCS playoffs, Danny was no longer in a state to continue grinding the game. I think that this section is actually gives you a little bit of insight in terms as to I talked about what Peter Dunn said about Danny last week in terms of his mental health, and I think maybe Rigby didn't quite understand some of the things that Peter Dunn understand, obviously because Danny spoke to Peter Dunn frequently, apparently in private, right? So maybe these are things that Danny felt more comfortable talking to Peter Dunn about because Peter Dunn is maybe more personable, and could maybe more empathetic toward him compared to Rigby, who is looking at the game from a coach's standpoint of performance and wants to maximize said performance by picking champions that are better in the meta, pushing his players to their best. Right? These are things that the coach is going to try to do, and maybe Rigby isn't as good as an emotional coach as he is a strategic coach. Right? That's something to consider. So he goes, as a person, I get it. Sometimes high stakes and high expectations can get to you, but as a pro, you're being paid to play the game. What about the rest of your team and the people who want to win it all? Now, he mentions this as kind of a jab um, to Danny to some degree, but I think, again, if you look at what Peter Dunn said, it's more so that he actually was thinking about them to the point where he was trying his hardest to keep playing for as long as he possibly could for his teammates. And he just wasn't able. At some point, it just reached a breaking point, and he was trying to keep going, even though he knew it wasn't good for him. Personally, he even though it wasn't good for him personally from a health standpoint, mentally and physically, he still chose to play because and work hard for the sake of his teammates. So I think that's something that maybe Rigby doesn't understand fully. Again, this is all I'm just kind of speculating. Again, translation's not 100%, so who knows, right? As a professional, I won't lie, it was a little bit disappointing. In the end, the team as a whole decided Danny's health was more important than anything else. I think when he says that it's disappointing, I think it definitely in the sense that Danny's a very talented player, and seeing him kind of not be able to cope mentally with the pressure and with other things going on, it sucks to see, right? And so I hope that that's kind of what he means by that. Not in the sense of like, wow, Danny really let me down. You know what I mean? Like I don't think that's what he's trying to say in this, right? I don't fault anyone on the issue. People just had differing takes on the right thing to do. I assume on the way to handle Danny's situation. It's kind of like well, I'm not really going to get into this, but it's kind of like the Charlie situation. You throw somebody under the Charlie for the team, whatever. From team perspective, taking care of players should be the high on the list of priorities. I wanted to sub in Kaori for the TL game, but Kaori wasn't. Or Kaori, I keep saying Kaori, I'm so sorry, was in Turkey at the time, so he continued to play with Danny. Yeah, and so he basically wishes him that he hopes he's healthy and everything. And so, and he mentions here, I don't think he would have been overjoyed to hear from him personally. Um, you know, Basically, kind of, ensuring that, like, yeah, or confirming that yeah, Rigby and Danny's relationship isn't probably the best, and I would imagine it has to heavily deal with the fact that he pushed him extremely hard, from and they probably only really had a coach-to-player relationship. Um, Danny's a more reserved guy. He's not going to be as open, and emotional toward his coach maybe compared to others. And for some reason, Danny felt very comfortable talking to Peter Dunn, right? And he just didn't feel that way with Rigby. So I think that's probably a big reason why. It's probably just Rigby pushing him to be the best player Danny can be, which is an okay thing to do. It's just obviously when the player is emotionally not in the right place, that can be hurtful to them, right? So I think that's kind of all I have to say about this section. With JoJo, he was unsatisfied with the level of practice he got in North America. After meeting some of the best players in the world at MSI, he wasn't motivated with the practice in North America. I tried to convince him otherwise, pleading with him for hours, but he remained unchanged during the entirety of Summer Split. After Worlds, JoJo apologized to me, saying that he regretted the time he wasted during the middle of the year. I think this is a valuable lesson that JoJo has learned. Um, and this is the perfect time for him to learn it. And this is exactly why MSI was such a big deal for someone like JoJo to participate in, right? He went to MSI, he probably got battered, and you know what? He learned a lot from it. And then when he went back to NA, he realized how bad North American practice really is. Because once you've competed against the international teams, you start to realize how bad the North American teams are. And so he fell into that classic North American trap of just saying, yeah, but these players aren't even good, so why bother even try practicing against them? They're not the international competition I was playing before. You know, these guys are shit essentially, right? Like I don't want to practice against these people with the same amount of effort that I was practicing at MSI. It's not as motivating when you're not playing the best, right? And you know you're not playing the best. And obviously Rigby recognized that this was the mindset that JoJo was in and tried to tell him, no, don't do this, don't waste your time. And Jojo didn't really listen. And after Worlds, Jojo realized his mistake and he's apologized and he's sorry for wasting time during that summer after MSI, right? Um, so I think that's something that is a valuable lesson for Jojo to learn, and I think Jojo is one of the players who has a really really high ceiling. Could be one of the best. I mean, in theory, he could be the best, potentially the best, one of the best mid laners of all time, if in North America, which I know is a big thing to say, but he has that potential to hit that. I'm not saying he will, but I'm saying if he does put in the work, and if this lesson that he's learned really he does take it to heart, and he does work as hard as he can, and listen to his coaches and take the criticism and constantly improve. I mean, I think JoJo is going to be a force in the LCS. So very valuable lesson and nice to hear this kind of information, right? This is stuff that you don't typically get to hear. One of the benefits of, a coach leaving is that, all the dirty laundry gets aired out, right? So EG players and staff. So he talks about Peter Dunn here. He also talks about JoJo as well. He mentioned something with Cowrie. I'm not really going to get into it. It's more of a joking, like funny remark. Um, So he does mention Impact. He said the only reason he even came to North America was because of Impact. He actually got a hit to his paycheck for just coming to North America. So it's just because he wanted to work with Impact, and as you can see, he holds Impact in very very high regard. So obviously, um, just really sad to see Impact go, obviously, but an incredible person and player. And just this just gives you even more respect for Impact, right? As for JoJo, he said, or actually JoJo Inspired and Vulcan, he says, I think that Inspired, JoJo, and Vulcan would all have made a name for themselves even if they played in Korea. I assume this is, well, I guess he goes into more detail here, right? I had a lot of fun with JoJo this year and I taught him some Korean. JoJo is somewhat new to the game, so it was very easy to convince him that I was some kind of League of Legends guru. And, yeah, all the Koreans that play Champions Q are probably familiar with JoJo. So that's also really cool to hear, right? Um, but yeah, I think he mentions here that Inspired, JoJo, and Vulcan would all have made a name for themselves even if they played in Korea. I think he's saying that because I think they're people that genuinely work really hard and want to improve. And I think obviously, you're like, well, what about last week when Vulcan had that post about work ethic and whatnot, and he was saying that NA players probably do have a worse work ethic and like whatever, that's not a big deal. Look, Vulcan's saying that I would imagine is because he knows the practice isn't as good as North American compared to it is internationally. He would much rather if he got the competition that he had internationally, if he got that level of practice, he would be working extremely hard. Now, is that entirely an excuse to not work as hard? No, but it definitely, you do have to understand, it definitely makes it a lot more difficult to work as hard when you know that the practice you're playing against isn't really as good as it could be, or as the practice that you've played against in the past, right? Um, So I think that's why he's mentioning Inspired JoJo and Vulcan. I think he throws these players together because he understands that they have a very good work ethic and that they want to get better at the game. And if you put them in a really intense environment like Korea, obviously some people are going to sink, some people are going to swim, and he believes that that they would swim and that they would work really hard and improve and get to the level that they need to be at to play in Korea, right? It's just nice praise to hear, right? Not going to talk about this. This is the Cowrie thing. Peter Dunn. Peter Dunn wanted to leave EG after this year because he felt he had been at the org long enough. He likes to try different things out and to build things from the ground up. He also works very hard and has my respect. So I think that is, obviously that's kind of, we knew this about Peter Dunn. He does like to build things up. He likes to make things his own, right? And so obviously love Peter Dunn and, best of luck to him in the future. That's kind of it for this little Rigby thing. I did think some of these points were super, super interesting. And there's more here, obviously, talking about the casters and the coaches and scrims and all these other things, right? That you can take a look at if you'd like. But yeah, just thought it was super interesting. Just thought it was really, really nice to kind of see, um, you know, some of those thoughts from Rigby, as well as just those are my thoughts about the LCS team in 2023, or at least moving forward for so far. I'm sure there'll be some more news regarding League of Legends, the League of Legends team in the future. But for right now, that is what I have to say about the League of Legends roster. Um, okay. As for Dota 2, which again, for some reason, my font will not let me select 2 as a valid number. Like, it won't even show the number when I type it. So I'm just going to have to say Dota. I'll put Dota roster so that it looks better, I guess. I didn't even spell that right. There. I'm not going to lie, guys. This is the sad part of the podcast episode. So, Evil Geniuses has decided to say goodbye to Abed, Arteezy, Bulba, Crit, Fly, and Nightfall. After the disappointing international TI run. And they've decided that they want to go to a South American roster. They're actually going to go. They signed the Thunder Awaken roster, which is the roster that beat them in TI. And they've left and pulled out of North American Dota. It sucks. It really sucks. Look, I'm emotional over it, and frankly, I don't even really follow Dota 2 as much as I wish I did slash could. Frankly, I just don't understand enough about Dota from a viewing perspective, and I've never really, that I can't really say as much about Dota 2. But I'm no idiot. I understand the level of history that Evil Geniuses has in Dota 2. Dota 2 is actually one of the only games that EG has like a good reputation in, and pretty much all of that reputation is based off of um, the previous ownership with Andrew Garfield, which I will get to Andrew Garfield in a second because he did post a pretty lengthy thread regarding the recent news about the Dota 2 squad um, being released, and yeah, it's just this sucks. This sucks. I think this is shit, frankly. I mean, I understand that EG wants to be all, develop talent and everything, but this is just like a slap in the face to to anyone who respects the history of the org. Um, fucking sucks. It fucking sucks, honestly. And to add to the disrespect, they didn't even try. It took them a considerable amount of time before they even posted a video of highlights of the players who have been here for ages. Um, it's fucking pathetic. I've been shitting on the marketing team practically every single week. I will continue to do so. The marketing for Evo Geniuses is absolute dog shit. Um, they what no appreciation post. Nicole made a video. Cool. Like that's it. That's all these guys are gonna get. I am going to be so interested to hear what Bulba has to say about this after time has passed and he can kind of air out the dirty laundry. People like Arteezy, Crit, Fly, Abed, like I would love to hear what these guys are going to say. You know, um, I'd love to hear what they're going to say, post, after some time has passed, right? Because I bet there's no way this was done well. There's no way this was handled properly. This looked like Nicole woke up one day and was just like, "Oh, we have a Dota 2 team? Oh, that's crazy. What kind of roster do we have? Oh, we have about a bunch of like old veterans that are really respected and just like really. I don't want that. I want young players. So can we leave North America and just go to South America because they're exciting and I love Brazil and I love like what are we doing? Like I don't know. This just feels really disrespectful, frankly. It just feels disrespectful. Um, and not really all that justified, frankly. So let's get into it a little bit more. Um, so basically, I did want to show this image. I think this shows a lot. Um, this is RTZ and his history with Evil Geniuses, guys. Mind you, they didn't do jack fucking shit. They didn't do a special for all these players, especially someone like RTZ. RTZ deserves his own fucking video, fucking merch, the whole fucking thing. He deserves everything. Look what he gave to EG, guys. Look at this shit. This is fucking unreal. Look at this shit. 6 lands 1. Like, average TI position, 7. Played it, let's see, it shows he played it 5 TIs for EG. 9 major top 3s. Earned 1.7 while with EG. Played with 19 different teammates. Had a 63% win percentage. Played 1,056 games under EG's banner. Like, how have we just abandoned this team, especially Arteezy, and we just have, like, no appreciation post. No, like, there's no grandeur to any of it. It's just like, oh yeah, by the way, we're picking up we're picking up a new roster. We're changing to South America. Bye. Like, this is appalling. It's just appalling. Um, Brutal. You can see here. Well, actually, let's see. I'm gonna go. So you can see here's the post. Basically, guys, they are picking up the Thunder Awaken roster. I'm not going to talk about that too much because, frankly, it's not really the point of this section. And also, I don't know enough to really say if they're even that good or if they're not. I mean, from what I can tell, it sounds like they have a potentially they could have a higher peak. They did well. They did okay at TI. I don't know. You know, it's not. I don't have anything against the players or anybody from that Thunder Awaken roster. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that EG's history is built here. EG has a long-standing history in Dota 2, especially North American Dota 2. They've been the flagship org in North American Dota 2 for ages, and they're just throwing it away. Does Nicole want to be hated by every esports fan base that she participates in? Because it fucking feels like it half the time. Like, you've done a good job with the LCS squad, right? They don't meme you anymore. They actually like you to some degree. Now, they'll never like you as much as people like 100 Thieves or Cloud9 or Team Liquid, but they like you. They'll like you for as long as you're good. The second you're shit, they'll shit on you. But, like, they don't like us in Valorant. They don't like us in Counter-Strike. They don't like probably not gonna like us now in Dota 2, I'd imagine. I mean, from all the things I've been seeing, it's how upset the fans are, how sad they are about EG leaving North American Dota 2. Like, it's just depressing. Like, nobody wants to believe in EG anymore. Like, it's all just going downhill. Like, why are you creating enemies for no reason? Is it a competency problem? Do you know what you're doing? These are all things that I think at this point you have to ask. So, look, right? It's look. This guy mentions on Dota, he kind of is like reacting to it all. Right? They're picking up the Thunder Awaken SA roster and everything, right? And this guy had a nice post where he mentions kind of, there's a lot of different, monetary reasons for why this might be the case. EG may not have the money that they used to. I don't think that's true at all, though, in the sense that look at what they're fucking paying for their LCS team and their how many players they're paying for EG's CS team. Like they have the money, and if they don't, I don't know why they're doing the things they're doing. Whatever. Um, but he does mention here that kind of let's see, where does he mention it? Let's see here. I don't know, but he does mention. I can't see maybe it was somebody else who said that. Oh yes, cheaper wages, probably a higher ceiling. There's a chance that might be why they chose to go for it. Um, yeah, and he mentions here kind of how look, this just goes to show you people are just not. It's just getting sadder and sadder for EG in Dota 2. Like no, the reputation that they want EG to be good. They really care about EG in Dota 2. It's something that doesn't happen for EG very often. Nobody cares about EG in any other esport, not to this degree. And it just feels like they just shit in all the fans' faces. And they just treated them, and they treated the situation so poorly too. It's not like they like made it this grand thing and like really did all these things to show their appreciation to the old players and people like Arteezy who had been there for ages. Like it doesn't really look like they've done that at all. um and it feels like they just kind of did it. I would love to know if these players even knew that this shit was even going on, right? um and so getting into this is the biggest, probably the craziest, or not craziest, but I would say probably the most important section of the video, or the podcast, is Alex Garfield, who is the former CEO of Evil Geniuses. Right, this is the guy who built Evil Geniuses from the ground, and obviously, he is. It doesn't matter when you leave your organization, that you previously owned. It's your baby to some degree. Like it's what you built, right? So you're always going to keep an eye on it. You're always going to have an emotional tie to what goes on, and how they treat your baby. Post you owning it, right? So it holds a special place in your heart, right? And so I think, Alex, Garfield, he kind of, listen, you don't have to agree with everything he says, but, he talks about this and kind of how he feels the new Evil Geniuses management has kind of been. And it's not in glowing fashion, guys. It's not in glowing fashion. And he has, and this is just the tweet. He does obviously here, he has like a twit longer where he kind of goes in depth a lot more. And we'll get to this in a second, which is right here. But for now, let's kind of go through his thread here, and you can kind of see, what he has to say about the Dota 2 news. I'll also retweet it just in case, um, you want to take a look. So I'm saddened by today's news of EG releasing its Dota 2 division. NA Dota 2 has obviously been a staple for EG for a very long time, and and for the most part was the last piece of the organization connecting to its legacy. And that's very true. Obviously, Arteezy was been there since for a long, long time, right? Since the old management, right? There have a lot of the Dota 2 team really did have the most pieces from the previous management, and now that is gone. And so that's kind of what he's talking about here. Um, he says, back to Dota 2, I'm not only saddened by this announcement, but in the way it was done, right? Just like we talked about. I feel that the current roster, as well as all the people who have contributed to EG Dota over the years, deserve much more. I'd like to take it upon myself to try and offer some thanks. Um, he goes, and he kind of breaks it down. He goes to every single player that's been, I mean, not every single player, I don't think, but, most of the people that are, been with EG, right? He mentions about Fear. He talks, uh, he says good things about Fear and Universe, and he thanks all of these pro players, right? And talks about the moments that they've had over the years, right? And memories that they've had. They mentioned here Fly, Crit, and Abed. Thank you for everything you've done for EG over the past couple of years. I may not know you as well as some of the others on this list, but it's still appreciated. Hopefully, we can get to know each other more in the future. Obviously, Bulba, thank you for all your contributions as a coach of the team. The combination of you, Phil, and Charlie at TI5 was one of the best coaching staffs I ever had. And then to Arteezy, he mentions, thank you for being the coolest boy of all time and giving me some of the best memories I've had in esports. Recruiting you and all the conversations we had around bringing you to EG are truly unforgettable, and you deserve the fan base you have. Um, and so this is kind of what he says. Um, these are the kind of this is his appreciation post to all these players, right? Um, it's sad. You can tell it's heartfelt. He put a lot of time into this, and he goes into even more detail here. Um, he has a lot of things to say about kind of everything that where EG has been going and whatnot, right? And so he has something to say. He says he has to. It's not just about today's news that Evo Genius has released one of its most iconic divisions and some of its most iconic players. A division, players that are so synonymous with the legacy and history of the brand and have been with it for so many years. And here's one thing or two I want to mention. It's not like they've had these players for this long and the players are washed now. Like these players are really fucking good still. Like RTZ is still really fucking good. Like it's not like it's one of those where it's like, yeah, listen, I understand it's about the history, but like the players are washed and they're not as good as they used to be. It's like, no, they're still really talented players, guys. Um, Look, 3 years ago, when the organization initially scrapped its iconic logo and the brand maker that had come along with it for almost 20 years, I reacted like a lot of other people did. I was pissed, as I think was the case for a lot of the community, it was justified. The decision to just ditch such an iconic brand marker that had taken almost 2 decades to build a legacy around was mystifying. I think this is definitely true. Um, I was definitely upset with the new logos and stuff. Even the newest logo, I do like the new logo, but he does mention here he thinks it's kind of change for the sake of change, and to that point, yeah, I kind of agree. Um, of course, the organization shortly backpedaled after that and redid the new logo into something more similar to its predecessor, but it still just wasn't very good in my opinion, and perhaps more importantly, still just felt like a change for the sake of change. Call me a nostalgist if you want. Maybe I'm just someone who's overly attached to the old EG, but I don't think so. I mean, there's no doubt that it holds a very special place in my heart, and there's no doubt that I'm in a position to remember it in a certain way. But I don't think those things are the only reasons for the feelings and sentiments I'm expressing here. Um, at least so he's recognizing, kind of his own, biases. I don't mean to any disrespect to Nicole or any of the current Evil Genius's management, but I just don't understand some of these decisions. I know I've tweeted different things over the past couple of years, including more supportive comments when the logo was re-released. But to be honest, I didn't really mean them. I was just trying to bridge build, and it was a mistake. I think the new logo sucks, to be honest. It feels like more change for the sake of change, which is not a good reason to change things up. Very valid. Um, Again, none of this is to discount some of the notable accomplishments made by the current management. The team obviously did very well in the LCS this year, and securing a Valorant slot is laudable as well. But that's not an excuse for basically just sweeping your own history under the rug for seemingly no reason other than not wanting to remember it. Um, Today's announcement of the release of the Dota 2 team is not just sad in and of itself, but is in fact what seems to be the final nail in the coffin for a legacy brand that seems hell bent on forgetting its own history. To which point I would again ask, why? How does this benefit you? Look, I get it. It's not my team anymore. That much is for sure. Today marked basically the final nail in the coffin for anything reminding anyone of the old EG. Better, worse, whatever you want to call it, it's definitely not the same. But do we really need to be erasing history? There's got to be a better goodbye than this, because that's what this really is. Not just a goodbye to Dota 2 with EG as we know it, but a goodbye to the final piece of what reminded us of EG as it once was. There's got to be a better way to honor EG's brand's legacy, better than is being done now. And whether that's through the community, former staff, and players, or via the new management, I hope we can find that way. Sincerely, Alex Garfield, former CEO of Evil Geniuses. So you can tell, pretty emotional over the whole situation. Um, you know, about the logo, like, is he being, you know, a bit biased? Obviously, but like, I think it's valid. Like, the new logo is good, but it is change for the sake of change. And frankly, actually, you know what I will say? Maybe it's not change for just the sake of change. Maybe it's change because Nicole wants this to be hers. So much so to the point where she just wants to change everything to make it her own. And while that's understandable, you know, I understand what Andrew, or I'm sorry, not Andrew, what Alex is trying to say here in terms of, you know, look, it's fine. I understand that you want to change, that you want to change things because it's new management, right? But you know, that doesn't mean you have to completely just disregard all the history that the organization used to have or has had in the past, right? Like, you don't have to just completely, you know, forget about it or not mention it and not do its justice just because, you weren't in control at the time, right? It's petty. It sounds petty to me, right? Um, Frankly, I think that's the best way to describe what Evil Geniuses has done in regards to um, respecting the old legacy that they had is is they're just being petty. Um, like I said when I started this podcast, back in the first episode, I kind of, um, I wanted to follow Evil Geniuses, and I supported them because I remembered the old days. I remembered when they were in COD and they were the best. I remember seeing EG's logo and seeing that name and going, "Oh shit," you know, these guys mean business. Like, these guys are the best of the best. Like, they are top dogs in every game they're in. This is an organization you do not enjoy playing against. You know, because you just know they're going to give it all they've got. They're going to have extremely talented players, some of the best players, or best players in the esport, and they're going to, they're just so good, right? And it was one of those things where, like, look, there were rumors about EG going to Counter Strike many, many years ago, before they ended up coming in like what 2019. Um, I think it was rumored in like 2016 or so, 2016, 2017. Um, and dude, I was excited. I was like, dude, EG is gonna join Counter Strike. That's sick. Like, they're one of the best orgs in the world. They're an organization that is just going to have a top team at all times and is just always going to be fighting for the championship. That's not what EG is anymore. As much as they want to say they care about winning, they care about winning, sure, but they care about winning in their own way, and it's not really the best way to win. Um, in the sense of, you know, it's not the most consistent. It's they want to win through talent development. That's how they want to win. And it's like, I understand it. You want to develop talent, but like, you're just disregarding the history that you've had. The expectations are still going to be there. You can't just completely 180 on what the org used to be just because, well, we're different. We're not going to do it that way. Like, it just seems wrong. Um, I feel bad for the Dota 2 players and the coaching staff. I feel bad for them. I don't think that this went down amicably. There's no way I can know that, but it just doesn't feel right. Um, and it's sad. And so, obviously, I'm not trying to say this to say that the new EG is all bad. Obviously, there's good aspects to it, right? You have, because they are focusing on talent development, you have moments like Jojo Pyun joining the team and getting better, and Peter Dunn joining, and the way they developed the LCS squad was really, really good, right? They did a really good job with it. Counter Strike, look, yeah, obviously it's not as good as what we want, right? We want EG fighting for the number one spot at all times, no exceptions. They're obviously not doing that. The CS team is starting to move in the right direction, sure. I don't think all their ideas are well thought out, like having two academy rosters, for example. Um, you know, but um, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There's not many positives to take with the EG CS:GO squad. It's underwhelming as fuck. Um, I don't know, dude. Just it just doesn't feel like they care. It just doesn't feel like they care. And if they do care, they haven't shown it. And they definitely haven't shown that they're willing to actually, you know, build their brand. They seem to just oddly enough just not care about their reputation as an organization. Um, they're perfectly fine with everybody hating them, and not in the good way that like for example, when I say EG should take advantage of their branding as being called evil geniuses, it's like, yeah, you take advantage of that by being the best team in the world and shitting on people. And then people fucking hate to play against you, and they're scared to play against you. And you can be like, oh, then you can really play into the whole evil geniuses angle, right? And you can become villains, you know. Um, think like for Counter Strike, think of like a Fnatic 2015 type thing. You know what I mean? That's kind of what you want. A team that's super fucking good, just scares anybody playing them, right? And they have the branding that they can really feed off of that, right? Not this. This is the complete fucking opposite. Now people just fucking hate you because you're shit. Like, I wanted it to be the other way around. I wanted it to be they hate you because you're good, not they hate you because you're shit. Um, and that just kind of seems to be what it is right now. So, yeah, it sucks. Um, so I'm sorry. I know this is a little bit of a downer episode. But frankly, it just sucks. Just feels like they don't care. Um, and I know that's obviously not going to be a popular opinion amongst anyone working at EG. But listen, this is what people see on the outside, right? This is what people see on the outside. And if you don't like that, make the changes internally to, how do I phrase this? Make the changes internally that you need to make so that you portray yourself better externally. Because right now you're doing a pretty bad job of both. Um, internally good in some ways, but externally pretty much terrible across the board except for LCS, right? Um, and I think again, a lot of that lays on the marketing team. Just saying, the marketing team should control or is responsible for everything regarding the public, or not everything, but a major portion of what do people think about you from an external perspective. I think the fact that EG has no content is a problem. I think that EG's merch is a problem. It's not very good. There's not much of it either. I think the fact that they're not, you know, they just don't do as much as other orgs do. They just don't. And when you're trying to compete with people like big names like Cloud9 and 100 Thieves and Team Liquid, like you can't just rest on your laurels and just kind of make content when you want to, and not really try to, you know, uh, get a better public perception, um, you know, because right now it just feels like EG is just like a fucking shell, an empty shell, and they just don't, nobody cares about them. And why should they? They don't even care about their own history. So, whatever. Um, yeah. So, sorry, a little bit of a downer of an episode, but just sad news for Dota 2 overall. Really, really sad news. I hope the best for all those players and coaches. As for League of Legends, obviously good news for League of Legends. Like I'm not trying to spin this as an entirely negative episode. Like the League of Legends moves have been good. I still think I would have liked to see Surdy on the roster, but you know what? I'm not going to complain with Someday. Someday's a good player. From in terms of if you can't have impact, what's the next best import top laner you could get? Yeah, probably Someday. He's probably up there on the list, right? In terms of experience and whatnot. So look, overall good moves. I think EG's LCS team has a really, really good chance of potentially just winning the LCS again. Well, not winning the LCS, but you know what I mean. Because they didn't win the LCS last year, but doing really well in spring. Having a good run all the way throughout next year, right? I think they have a good roster for it, right? So, and they did a great job with the coaches and everything too. So look, LCS things are going great, but I just feel like EG is really only good at managing their LCS team. They don't really know what they're doing in terms of managing the Rocket League. Or Rocket League's been up and down, okay, whatever. Not doing a very good job managing the Dota 2 squad now after this news. Not doing a great job with the CS:GO squad. I will say it's getting better. It's obviously getting better these past couple months, but look, not at the expectation that we want it to be at. Um, yeah, it just feels like they really are only doing a good job with LCS. It's kind of it. Um, and that sucks to see. I think a big problem is that you have one manager managing multiple different esports. Just saying, that's a problem that like a lot of teams have. A lot of orgs just use one GM, and the GM like is making deals for every single esport game that they're in. It's like, how can you possibly be knowledgeable enough to make those decisions? Who knows? But yeah, all right, I'm done talking. I'm a little out of it, but yeah, hopefully, uh, like I said, probably won't make an episode next week due to Thanksgiving and whatnot, and the new computer parts and everything. Basically, I have to rebuild my computer from scratch, so it'll be fun, I guess. But yeah, so expect an episode not next week, but the week after. I was gonna make a video talking about Anubis and my thoughts on Anubis as a map, but frankly, I think at this point, I'm probably not going to do it this week. I might do it at the end of next week, but frankly, there might be so many videos about thoughts on Anubis that my video, frankly, wouldn't be worth making. So we'll see. Um, but yeah, all right. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in 2 weeks' time.